Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the last installment of 2017 of the EdTechTeam Teaching and Learning Webinars. We have an amazing webinar set up for you tonight. I encourage you to join us in the chat to take a look at the slides. I'm going to be sharing all of that right now. So let me go ahead and screen share. My name is Lisa Thuman, and I will be your host this evening. All right, so welcome to Accessibility for All. You can find all of tonight's resources at the address at the bottom of the screen, edtech.team/December 12 webinar. Make sure to capitalize the D in DEC. And we'll be sharing that URL many more times. I am with you tonight with Jeffrey Humphreys from Ottawa, Jennifer Kronk from New York in the United States, and Nancy Kawaja, also from Ottawa, and they will be our panelists this evening. I encourage you to go into the chat when you have questions so that Jeffrey, Jennifer, and Nancy can respond to them in between each presentation. Again, you can find all the session resources at edtech.team/DEC12 webinar. Also, please complete this form because we will be giving away a free EdTechTeam online course on accessibility at the end of our webinar together. I'd like to start by introducing our first speaker, Jeffrey Humphreys. He's an AT specialist in Ottawa, and I'm going to stop screen sharing and hand things over to Jeffrey. Welcome, Jeffrey.
Thank you, Lisa. I'm going to start by sharing my screen now. And the first thing I want to talk about tonight is a program that many of you may be aware of. It's called Read and Write for Google. It's by a great company, TextHelp. And I just want to kind of show you, highlight a few of the things that are often overlooked. So when you go to use Read and Write, once you install it, it is an extension. And we do have a link there coming for you to get access to it. When you go into a Google Doc, it'll install this little purple puzzle piece. And when you click on it, it drops down and gives you a whole bunch of different items that you can choose from to assist students or yourself in completing tasks. Like I said, I'm just going to highlight a couple of them. The first one is word prediction, and it is the very first tab. When you click on the first icon, word prediction, you're going to get a list, and it gives you the first 10 most commonly used sentence starters. So this is great for students just to get them going. But what I really like about it is it's based on phonetic spelling. So as I continue to spell, and I spell the word incorrectly, school with a K, as a typical elementary student may, or even a high school student, you'll see the very first word in the list is actually school. When I hover over the word school, I actually hear the word school in my headset or on my speakers, and I can click on it and it'll actually change the text for me. So this is great for helping students who have difficulties with spelling. It's great because it encourages them to continue spelling and sounding out words so they think it may be spelt, and by the time they get to the end of it, many times that word will appear in the list. The list is based on phonetic spelling, but it also comes from TextHelp compiling many different texts and looking at the algorithms of the text of what words are constantly or commonly coming after those words. So it'll actually help you complete sentences based on other pieces of writing. So that's word prediction. You turn that off. The other one that's often overlooked is called voice notes, and it's this little icon that has a little play button in it. And when you first install Read and Write, it's actually located at the very end of the toolbar. And voice notes was intended to for teachers to give feedback to students, but I like to flip things around and use it for a student usage. And so a lot of us have to scribe for our students in the classroom. One of the things that voice notes can actually help you with that, in the sense that it just records the audio of the student. So in this example, you may have a science test or something where you're asking a student to explain what the water cycle is. So the student can highlight the question. They can click on voice notes. They're going to get prompted to record their voice. So they're going to click record. Here they would record what the water cycle is. They'd go through answering their question, and then they would hit insert. And what it does is it takes that audio file and it attaches it to where I select the text. And what you're going to see in a second once it uploads, it'll be a comment on the right-hand side in Google Docs. So you can see it over here. And it's now a play button. And if I click on that play button, it's playing back what I just said. So it's basically taking what a student has said. It's allowing you to almost have a scribe, but you could do this with multiple kids in your class, which is huge for a lot of teachers and a lot of students. No longer worrying about that written output. We're looking at the knowledge and understanding rather than the ability to write something. So I often find in things like science and social studies, teachers tend to gravitate towards using written components, so a written test to see the knowledge and understanding, which is not fair to those students who may struggle with language. And having something like this is going to allow them to truly explain their thinking. And then the last feature I want to show you, which is always a part of Read and Write, is the playback. And this just allows me to click anywhere within a Google Doc. I can hit play. It highlights the sentence. And then what it does is it actually reads back to me in my headset, and it tracks the words as they're being read. And so studies have shown that it helps with students with decoding. It also helps them with, not comprehension, sorry, it helps them with decoding and that tracking of the words. So it actually helps them with the fluency as well. They see the word, they hear the word. So it's going to help improve that as well. So that is sort of a couple of the tools in Read and Write that I really, really love. The other thing I want to talk about is the ability to do speech to text, to do voice typing. And so I've just flipped my tab. I'm in a Google slide, and this would be a task maybe we would have a student do. We maybe would have them talk about what they did on the weekend. And so I've taken a picture here in Canada. We got a little snow. We put some Christmas lights up. And one of the things I often get asked is the ability to use voice typing. And it's not really intuitive in Google Slides. In Google Docs, you can go to Tools, Voice Typing, and start speaking, and your text will be transcribed. In Docs, though, in Tools, it says Voice Type to Speaker Notes. And so when I click on this, it's going to launch my voice typing menu. But where the text is going, it's actually going to go down here in my speaker's notes as opposed to my slides. So my little workaround for this is you're going to click on it. This weekend, we put our Christmas lights up, exclamation mark. You can see the text is down here. I can then copy it. So select the text and I copy it. And then I can paste it into my slide. And then you can rearrange, you can resize, change the style of font, do as you please. But I've now taken that text from my voice and put it into a slide, which is very useful. And it's just kind of one step less that most students will have to do. Okay, moving along, YouTube videos. The biggest thing I see when I go to conferences or I see videos being played within the classroom is a lot of times we don't put closed captioning on. And closed captioning is great for students to see the words. Maybe sometimes the speaker in a video is not being very clear, or maybe we have deaf and hard of hearing students in our class. So what I want to show you in YouTube is how you can auto turn this on. So when you upload a video, your video automatically, Google will take the video and pull the text from it and create closed captions. So when I click, I'm in my YouTube manager, video manager. When I click on a video, it's going to take me into the ability to edit it. And up in the top right-hand corner, you'll see subtitles, closed caption. And when I click on that, it's going to ask me to select the language in which I would like to have it uploaded into. So I'm going to go English, and I'm going to set my language. And that's all you need to do. Now in the background, it's going to start to pull the text out of it, and it'll put it into closed captions. So I'm going to show you just on another tab what it looks like. So, and this is one that's already been activated. It's already been uploaded. So when I click on it now, the video, you can see here, it actually shows me my timeline on what has been said at what point. And I can go in there and edit that and change it. So if something did not come across, proper words, proper language, it will allow me to go in and change it and correct it to make it look nice and clean. And then anybody can access the closed captions when they're playing a YouTube video by clicking on the little CC. I strongly recommend it, especially if you are presenting to large groups of people. Sometimes it's hard to hear, and being able to see that, it goes a long way for a lot of people. So almost like a mini slam here, read and write, and then using speech text into Google Slides, and then also make sure you use closed captioning in YouTube. That's my tips for the day. So back to you, Lisa.
Thanks, Jeffrey. We have a couple of questions that would be great to talk about. The first one is, could you talk a little bit about premium versus free access to read write?
Yeah, for sure. So you're right. Read and Write is a paid program. It's based on domain license. So generally districts purchase the license, but it is free to people. So parts of it are free to people, I should say. The read back, so the ability to have text to speech, so have your work read back to you, it is always free. The other feature that a lot of us are going to use, I think Jen's going to touch on this a bit, is the voice typing that I showed in Google Docs. It's a common one we use in Google Docs, and so it is also free because it's part of Google. So the only thing really you're not getting would be that voice notes and then the prediction. They have a lot of other tools that do a lot of great things, but for a lot of our learners, it's kind of those big three that we really look at. But I should also note that as teachers, you do have access to it for free as a teacher, which is great.
So we have a teacher in the chat who said that she had a grant for a couple of years that paid for her students to have access, and then the grant ended, so they don't have funding for it anymore. Are you aware of any other tools that are available that she might be able to get for free?
As far as, sorry, can you repeat that again, Lisa?
So we have a teacher in the chat who had a grant for 2 years to pay for read write for her students. And the grant is over and they don't have the funding to pay for it. Can she get those pieces from other tools that might be free?
Yeah, so the voice notes, there's a couple different options. One of the ones I've used in the past is Kazana Lite, which allows you to add those voice notes. The other one for word prediction, you could use Google Input Tools that actually will allow you to create word prediction. One of my common solutions, if your students are using Chromebooks, launch the onboard on-screen keyboard, and word prediction will show up like it does on a phone. And the word prediction is very, very good. So in a roundabout way, yeah, we can access a lot of those tools. One thing Read and Write does well is it puts it all into one nice, easy-to-use spot. But there's a couple examples of places where you could get some of those tools.
That's awesome, thank you. And then Kara, who's asking the questions, can you type his response suggestions, hearing impairment?
Yeah.
Yes?
I'll send you a note, Lisa, with those links out.
Awesome. So we'll go ahead and we'll put those in the chat for all of you. Thanks, Jeffrey. So I'm going to go ahead and screen share here again. And next up, well, first of all, we did kind of stop for questions there. I encourage you to complete that form to enter to win a free online course from EdTechTeam. It's a 15-hour course that you can complete over, 2 to 6 weeks, and it's on accessibility, so super helpful. If you're not going to use it yourself, you might actually transfer it to someone else, one of your colleagues that you work with, that might really benefit from it. You can find all of tonight's resources in the slide deck at edtech.team/DEC12 webinar, and there you'll also find later on tonight the link to the archived chat with all of the hyperlinks and the link to the archived YouTube video. Our next speaker comes to you from New York. She produces her own assisted learning podcast, and I'm sure she'll share that link with you as well, and also blogs about meeting the needs of all learners. So I'm going to hand things over to Jennifer Kronk. Welcome, Jennifer.
Thank you so much. Let me go ahead and screen share. Welcome everybody, and thank you so much for having me on this panel. So my name is Jennifer Kronk, and I do have the podcast Assist Learning, and I'm an instructional technology specialist, and I'm also learning disabled and have dyslexia and executive dysfunction. And those are what I blog and tend to do the podcast about. And one of the first ones that I want to bring to you today is Screencastify. And I know that anybody who talks about UDL or special education, we're all in favor of giving kids visual and audio cues in multiple ways for them to consume information. And I love Screencastify for a majority of reasons. Now, Screencastify is an extension. It sits up here on your Chrome web browser. And one of the reasons why I like Screencastify specifically is in digital learning environments, many of us are using Google Classroom now. And what we might tend to overlook is that many of our students might have issues with short-term memory function. It's a very common thing that comes along with certain learning disabilities. And we might not know the process by which we need to go through, let's say, our Google Classroom. So I encourage teachers to create a screencast of a tour of what are your stopping points, how this process is going to run, and what will that look like for you. I also like using Screencastify as a way of doing feedback. So for example, in my paper for Andy, I used to teach high school English. And one of the things that I noticed about all of my commenting to my students when I was doing this, whether it was for my special education students or my general education students, is I would spend all this time commenting, but they didn't quite understand what I meant. And then I had that pivotal moment where I realized students feel coached by my voice, but they feel picked apart by my annotations. So one of the ways that I like to use Screencastify is I might highlight an entire passage and I might indicate to a student that they have a punctuation issue, they might have a capitalization issue. If I'm dealing with somebody that, depending on the type of disability they're facing, I'd minimize the amount that I select and I might make that comment. But the important part for the meaningful feedback is this is where I'll use Screencastify and I'll go onto my tab function because this is where I get my markup tools. I could record my desktop or I can just record my camera. And camera is also a nice way for students just to leave feedback on their thoughts or reflection. So if I go to tab and I record my tab, I'll get a countdown in my headset. And now I can go through Andy's paper and I can say to Andy, you know, Andy, I think you did a really good job. When I take a look at your hook, remember we talked about this last week. I think we just need to specify a little bit more. This is where we're really going to engage your reader. And I can move through his paper and I can leave him feedback on the entirety of his paper. And the whole time he's hearing my voice and I'm continuing that relationship that I have with my student. When I'm done, I just simply click stop. I get the share option and I hear my recording. So I just go to share, grab my Drive link, and I can copy my link and go back into Andy's research paper and just leave meaningful feedback for him. So he's able to have a recording of all my feedback. Now, depending on the needs of the student, this might be done frequently or infrequently. I tend to do this on bigger projects or students that really seem to thrive on that one-on-one connection with the teacher. I use Screencastify in a variety of ways. I love it so much. There's also a link here to a Screencastify article when we were recently speaking about how I like to use it with special ed kids. Next, I'll be moving into dealing with distraction. So my daughter is ADHD, and I have become very fluent with some tools that really, really help. And the way I like to deal with distraction is first, I like to try to avoid it as much as possible. And there's a multitude of tools that are out there. My favorite to avoid distraction with ambient noise is Noisily. It's Noisili, Noisily. And I've linked out to all my images. So what Noisily allows me to do is I can create my own little ambient collection of noises that tends to help soothe me, drown out background noise so I can work effectively. This is really good for our students in classrooms that need to get work done but are just easily distracted by a multitude of things. This is a Chrome extension, but it's also a website. Next, if you can't always avoid, you might be able to try to control some of this distraction. And for my daughter in particular, she needs to move, and she needs to move, especially as part of transition activities for her to be able to refocus it. So she's elementary. So Go Noodle activities for her. I know almost every elementary experienced teacher knows about Go Noodle, but if you don't, please check it out. It's amazing. And basically it allows you to do exercises in a controlled space in an organized way. It has mindfulness training and yoga and active kind of dance, but it's all controlled. It's all within the context of a classroom. And there's a lot of educational things there too. And you're looking at Mick Pufferson, who is the class champ, and the kids really like to continue to do more videos because that makes Mick Pufferson get bigger and bigger and better. There's Move It, which is great as an independent activity for students. I wouldn't suggest competing with this as a teacher. So this is an extension, and what it does is it will pop up depending on the timer that you've set. So if I was a student, if I was giving a student choice, I would say, you know, what's a good time limit for you? 15 minutes, 10 minutes, where you just need to stand up and do something. And again, these are not large scale movements. Nothing is too crazy. It's all pretty much in one location, but it allows the student to have time to move for a few seconds. So that allows, in controlled bursts, some type of dealing with distraction and getting that energy out. And I really like these two extensions for restricting distractions. So Stay Focused is a great extension that you can set timers on, and you can set your preferences to lock you out of certain sites. So I have used Stay Focused on myself a few times with Facebook, and I may or may not have disabled this when I've gotten to the point where I needed to sign off of Facebook. Let me just go back. Here we go. And I really like this one for kids. This is a great one where basically it's like setting goals. So you decide to stay focused, and you're going to be working on this one site. And as you work, the longer you work, you grow a tree. And if you get distracted by extra tabs or you veer off what you're doing, the tree loses all of its leaves and you need to start over again. So I think it's a really cute, creative way for students to be able to self-monitor them, you know, what they need to be doing. And Jeff had already talked about speech to text, which is really powerful. And we have it native in our tools. And just like Jeff showed in slides, we also have it under tools and voice typing. It looks exactly the same in Docs. Now, what's important to keep in mind is that when you're doing text to speech, there's a protocol when you're using it. Many students who start to use speech to text might abandon it if they are not given a whole process to use. So the process I got was actually from one of my professors for Assistive Technology, Dan Cochran, and he published this book for free. And it's a great book, Speech Recognition as AT for Writing. And it talks about different forms of writing and using speech recognition. And my biggest takeaway from this was you first think the sentence, you say the sentence, and you hear it. Just like Jeff was saying, you could use Read Write Toolbar, or you could use Select and Speak, or Speak It. And then once you hear it, you fix it if you need to. Another thing to consider is the writing protocol by DeCoste, which is a great way of actually assessing if speech recognition is going to be something that is going to help a student when you're looking at possible classification for special ed. There's not any real assessments out there specific to that besides this. And this is a really, really thorough tool. So I thought it'd be useful to share. And so thank you very much.
Thanks, Jen. So we have a question.
Yes.
And anyone on the panel can answer it. But this comes from Lois. I don't know where she's from, though. During an IEP for a high school student who lacks organizational skills, it was wondered if we could make a Google form template that outlines writing an essay. like what is your topic sentence? What is your first supporting detail? And filter the responses of that Google Doc as an essay into an essay. So can forms filter to a Google Doc?
Oh, yeah.
And I bet everybody has an a Google Docs add-on that they would use with that. Jen, which one do you use?
I tend to use Autocrat, but yet another mail merge. But Autocrat's my jam. I love that. And it's really easy. So your path would be from going from a Google form to feed the sheet. And then the sheet is actually going to do the work. So that's where you put your add-on. Under add-ons, put in Autocrat. And you just need to come up with your template. So if you're going to be doing an MLA style template, if it's a high school student, you need to make sure that your template has double spacing, it has the proper font, it has everything that you want. And then you just set up your mail merge chevrons, and you could find tons of videos on how to do that.
My personal favorite is Form Publisher, because not only can you send Form Publisher to a Google Doc, but you could send it to a Google slide deck as well. Mm-hmm. Jeffrey, Nancy, anything you wanted to add in?
I was going to say Form Publisher, but you took it. Another one you could kind of use would be Doc Appender too, in the sense that it would take that documentation and put it into a Google Doc for you, or even something as simple as Save as Doc. If you just want to see it visually on a Google Doc rather than being in those sort of cells. Those add-ons as well.
Yeah, I love it. I absolutely love it. Great questions. Great questions. Okay, so we're gonna pause for just a minute here and come back over to the slide deck. We did take a question that actually came in via email. There's great chat and great resources being posted in the YouTube chat, which I'll archive to a Google Doc at the end of our time together. So if you're just joining us, you can find tonight's slide deck and links to everything that the presenters are sharing, how to contact them if you have questions, how to access any of the archives at edtech.team/DEC12webinar with a capital D. I encourage you to complete the form link there to be eligible to win a free accessibility online course from EdTechTeam. I will be drawing a winner randomly from the entries at the end of our time together. And our third and final speaker this evening, we're going to change course a little bit to iOS, will be Nancy Kawaja. And Nancy is an assistive tech teacher. She comes to us from Ottawa. And Nancy, I am going to switch things. Did I not screen share all of that?
I think we're good.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to switch things over to Nancy.
You were good.
All right. Let's see how we go here. Awesome. So right out of the box, iOS has phenomenal supports for accessibility. And so this evening, I thought I would speak just briefly about some of what iOS, being Apple, or Mac OS has to offer. Within the mobile family, you know, if you have your device and you've opened it up with your MacBook and you don't do anything once you've powered on, it will actually make the assumption that you are a person who is blind or low vision or visually impaired. Process with you verbally. It's absolutely phenomenal how intuitive this device is for support. And so one of the things that I've come to recognize over the past few years is that when assistive tech is both accessible and accessible, kids do so much better and experience success. And as it says, my assistive tech looks just like your watch. There are so many of us walking around with assistive tech in our pockets and wearables now, where in the past, perhaps these devices were big and clunky and we had abandonment issues once kids hit that 11, 12-year-old age, whereas now what's essential for some of us is just beneficial and good for all of us. So in looking at universal design, and when I think about how we prepare programming and lessons and learning experiences for students, I can't speak enough about the importance of accessing information. And receiving content in that digital format has a direct impact then on how students are able to process their meaning. And so that really plays to, as the discussion has gone this evening, the importance of being able to access text to speech. When we're handing out pieces of paper, it eliminates 20% of the students really that need to be able to listen in order to read. That obviously has an impact on how they're able to process their meaning, really chew on that information, and then be able to express their understanding. Because the IEP drives everything that we do, looking at some of the accommodations that we would have typically seen on an IEP, for example, providing a copy of notes, there are so many ways right on the device that we're able to support that. Using Siri, using the camera, airdropping notes, or using a free app like Join.me, which would then mirror the teacher's notes that are projected on the smartboard or screen back to the student's device. So you can have that reverse display go back to a student's device. They can then screen capture that, open it up in something like Notability or iAnnotate PDF, and make their own notes and voice files on top of that without then having to self-identify and ask another student to provide a copy of notes for them. Scribing, we really like to see a reduction in scribing and an increase in independence when students are able to take their own notes and make meaning out of that. So using Siri for that, using speech to text, or an app like Explain Everything. Preferential seating is another. I always kind of laugh. I'm not sure who it's preferential for, but using an app again like Join.me would allow a student with a visual impairment to sit anywhere in the room and have their mobile device with them, and at the angle and at the spacing that it needs to be. Students with attention deficit perhaps as well, or executive functioning needs, are able to sit where they choose in a flexible learning environment and have any content that needs to be consumed sent back to their device. Using something like FaceTime for partnering, graphic organizers, certainly in the process of scaffolding learning, right down to preparing for speech to text for essays, using organizers within Pages, an app like Poplet, or Tools for Students that provides pre-made templates for students to fill in. The calendar in any platform is probably one of the most important special education tools for chunking assignments, for preparing and planning and organizing all of those parts of executive functioning that are so important and become significant once we hit the junior through middle school and high school grades. Again, Poplet as a graphic organizer is great, but iCal or Google Calendar works fabulously with alerts and reminders as well. So looking at some of the supports right out of the box, when you go into your settings on an iOS device, you will find a section called Accessibility. And within that setting, you're able to find where you would choose your speech engine, the sound of the voice, the rate at which the voice is speaking. You would then also be able to set your text-to-speech format so that you could use Speak Screen or Speak Selection. Speak Screen is fairly new, and it allows you to use 2 fingers to pull down from the top of the screen, and it will bring up a toolbar that looks like a tortoise and a hare that allows you to speed up or slow down, and then it neatly tucks off to the side of the screen so that it doesn't take up too much space. I have a picture of the clock because it's very often we'll hear people talk about guided access, but sometimes guided access on an iPad can cause some difficulty when the adult who sets it forgets a restrictions code. So the timer, when you go in and set a timer, where you would normally choose the alarm sound or set a sound for when the time is finished, if you put stop playing, at the end of that time period, it will actually just have the device turn off. And so when we're working with students on a first then or a less preferred to preferred task, we will often set the timer for the period of learning and then have it set to turn off at the end of that time. Using speech to text, obviously. In notes, so moving across the screen in our notes section, you can now scan documents right from within the Notes app itself by just touching the plus, and you will see a prompt to scan documents. For our screen, we have the Apple Watch, certainly an assistive tech tool that I rely on a regular basis. The haptic response, tapping my wrist when my phone volume is off to remind me and prompt me for a calendar events is critical. Reader view, for example, in Safari. So when you launch Safari as your internet browser, you will see in the URL bar 3 little lines at the top left. When you touch those lines, it cleans up the page, much like Readability used to do, or within the Read and Write toolbar, the Simplify. Using Siri, working with students to recognize the power of using Siri to set reminders, schedule events and calendars, apps, open up maps, and ask for assistance as need be. And really, maybe not thought of as a special education tool, but that camera is able to take things that are maybe a bit abstract and make them concrete, and taking pictures wherever possible and adding them into docs and pages so that they can support students with visual reminders. Looking at the general tab and then accessibility within the settings feature itself is where you will find some of the most powerful accessibility for tools within the device. So Voiceover being a support for students who are blind, but then scrolling down to where you find speech, this is where you would touch the speech line, and it will open up to the speech to text and text to speech settings. Clips is a new tool that came out in the springtime, and it's a super powerful way to share learning for students. It has what I think is maybe one of the most exciting things to happen within the realm of captioning or subtitling in the past few years. So Clips has live titles. So it allows you to import video and images, providing live titles. So as I speak, my text comes up onto the screen, and you can, it's a fabulous way to create retells, task analysis, social scripts. So I've included one here that I will play that we created this summer. Michelle Cordy and I created this summer in an attempt to share accessible features of Twitter.
This can be a problem for blind and visually impaired individuals. Twitter now allows for these descriptions. Let me show you how. Here I am about to post a picture to Twitter. Notice it says Add Description in the bottom left-hand corner. After pressing Add Description, I say what's in the photo. It's a selfie of Nancy and I on a dock overlooking a pond. Now I can type out my regular tweet. Having a great time in King City, hashtag ADE 2017. Here is the finished product.
So Clips is a really exciting way for students, and we're using it as young as kindergarten and all the way through high school. A really great way for students to be able to share very accessible information, and certainly within the area of task analysis, creating recipes, social scripting, some of the more alternate curriculum. It can be fun and fabulous. And that is a quick look at supporting accessibility with iOS.
Wow, Nancy, you like blew me away. All three of you blew me away. I learned something new, and Jeffrey reminded me that I'm supposed to add closed captions to my keynote.
You got that subtle hint?
Yeah, it's on the list. But the iOS, like Nancy, that's phenomenal. Was everything that you showed us free?
Let me go back and take a look. Yes, all of the apps that are on the slide that I showed are native to the device, including Clips, which is new in the springtime.
That was one of the questions. Now, is Clips native only to iOS, or can we find that anywhere else?
Yes, Clips is an Apple product that you would find on iPad.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much. You know, before I've asked all the questions from the chat, but was there anyone, Jeffrey, Jen, or Nancy, you know, after hearing each other speak, was there anything that you wanted to add?
I have a question for the other two. It's a bold question. We're talking about this today, actually, we talk all about assistive technology and all the supports go along with it. And it kind of came back to me, Nancy, when you were speaking, is all of these things are in just regular, ordinary devices. So at which point do we stop using the label of assistive technology and it's just technology? And I really think in the next 5 years, we're no longer going to have assistive technology. It's just going to be tech. So I'm just curious your thoughts on that.
Well, isn't that universal design for learning, right?
Absolutely.
That every student is a unique learner, and there's something that we can do to accommodate everyone. And that's just, you know, typical technology. Jen, you look like...
I forgot I was muted. I think one of the things, and that was something I was struggling with for a while, I was going back to school for assistive technology. I think it's important to distinguish, and I'd really be interested to hear what Jeff and Nancy both have to think on it. And I totally agree to a certain degree with what Jeff is saying. I think there's a big overlap. Like assistive technology is incredibly broad, and it goes as far as like physical positioning and toileting and life skills and living completely independent in a smart home when you might be somebody who's cognitively impaired. So there's so much that is involved in assistive technology. That's why I focus on instructional tech to assist learning, because I really focus mostly on the special education as far as school. Like my realm is mostly has to do with education, but I'd love to hear what Nancy and Jeff think. And Jeff, like you asked the $1 million question. I mean, that's what we're all pondering the same thing, because one of my professors, the same one who wrote the book that I mentioned, is he used to hammer like, what is instructional tech and what is assistive tech? And what I've come with is that it's very, very subjective for the person and how it's used. I don't know. What do you guys think?
I really do agree. We've had a lot of conversation about that term assistive being relevant anymore. And I think sometimes I hold on to it because the ability to recognize the user's need and their ability to succeed without. So knowing that students with a learning disability, for example, are at or above average intelligence by basis of diagnosis. It's a fear of mine that if the device that allows them to excel and succeed isn't recognized as essential, then if they don't have access to it, then if it's just tech, then they might not be allowed to use it, and therefore they're not going to have the opportunity to excel. If we deem it assistive technology and therefore essential to access the curriculum, I feel very strongly that IEP accommodation will be honored, and therefore they are given every opportunity to exceed and succeed. So it's kind of, but I agree, honestly, my phone and my watch are assistive tech because of my disability, but to the person next to me, it just kind of keeps them on time. So it is a bit of a catch-22, but I think the more we have conversation about what assistive tech is and the usage, the purpose and the intent that the person is using it for, the more we talk about universal design, the more we create with universal design from the very beginning, as opposed to adding accessibility at the end, we have a better understanding of one another and how we learn.
Well said, Nancy.
Yeah.
Very well said.
For sure.
You know, and in the United States, as Karen's posting in the YouTube pop-out chat, it's federal. Assistive technology is defined in federal law, and it's part of IDEA. I don't know if you have a similar situation in Canada, or we've got people in the Hangout tonight watching from South Africa, from the Philippines. So I would assume it's a little bit different in every country. Okay, so let's do some screen sharing here. So we've been through this a few times. I'm not going to go over it again, but this is the course that many of you submitted to win for free. It's our Assistive Technology course, about 15 hours. If you win this in a moment or so, I'm going to introduce you to our director of EdTechTeam Online via email just in just a few minutes. I encourage you all to please learn more and stay connected with EdTechTeam. Follow us on Twitter. Join our Google Plus community. There's over 40,000 educators sharing awesomeness in that Google Plus community. And visit us at edtechteam.com. Tonight, Everything will be archived. There's a link there to the webinar. It's on YouTube. There's a link there to the archive chat. I'm going to post that. You can request a workshop with EdTechTeam on anything, but if you want to bring in somebody to work with your staff on assistive technology, universal design for learning, or just meeting the needs of all learners, by all means, click that link. And if you would like a 1-hour PD certificate for viewing this webinar, you can go ahead and fill out that 4th link there. So I don't have a date and time, but January's Teaching and Learning webinar will be Okay Google, how safe is my data? And we're going to talk about some of the laws that are going on in different countries in the United States. Where's your data stored? What's going on with your data? And some of those privacy issues that many of us, or perhaps the other educators that we work with, have concerns about. So I'm going to use something called Name Picker Ninja, and I'm going to go over to Name Picker Ninja here, and I'm going to click Go. The winner of the free online course tonight is Grace Ossio. So Grace, I will be reaching out to you about your free EdTechTeam online course. I'm going to go ahead and stop presenting there. I want to thank our panelists, Jeffrey, Jen, and Nancy, for joining us tonight, for spending, some of that family time that you probably would have had otherwise. Thank you so much. And we'll hopefully see you all on Twitter or online or at January's webinar. Thanks, everyone. Good night.
Thank you.